considered even dropshipping from China before. Considered. Come on, raise them up, raise them up, raise them up. Watch you guys here. Now, 1 minute, keep them up, keep them up, keep them up. If you ever thought that starting a fashion general store was a good idea. Yeah, not a good idea. Well, some of you, maybe you haven't started one yet. Today, I'm gonna talk about Shein. Shein, well, who here knows about Shein? Yeah? Who here buys from Shein? Partners, girlfriends, daughters buy from Shein? A lot of folks. Shein, at least in its beginning, was essentially a fashion dropshipping general store on steroids. And now, recently it peaked at a valuation of $100 billion. And it became the fastest growing fashion brand in history. Well, dropshippers would know this very well. In dropshipping, and Shein's model allows you to launch new product SKUs extremely quickly with extremely low risk. Before we talk about that though, let's talk about why. Compare that with your traditional retail model. Even comparing with something like Zara, which is fast fashion, which is faster than the traditional model. Zara is in 88 countries with 2,000 physical locations, and they have an extensive physical network across the world. And that is required for any kind of traditional retail operation. And that's required for a traditional D2C e-com model where you're sending your products to a local fulfillment center produced from China to the US, for example. Now, an inherent downside of that model is that it takes months to get to the fulfillment center before you can actually sell. That necessitates that you're holding months of stock at a time. And your local fulfillment and therefore sales can only really start once the goods get to your fulfillment center, which dramatically slows down your ability to go to market, and it requires a lot more cash to do so. Now, traditionally, retailers have to overstock in this situation because you want to avoid selling out. As an e-commerce or retail business, if you don't have stock, if you can't sell, you got no business. So they have to overstock, and that means cash tied up in months of inventory, and therefore a lot of risk and potential waste. Shein's model, and a lot of dropshippers are going to recognize this, Shein can ship to 150 countries, literally, primarily from one warehouse in Guangdong, China, which is very close to most of their suppliers, which means that they can get stock for new products and new batches extremely quickly and ship around the world. Each product launches with tiny quantities for minimal risk, almost no risk. Each product SKU, Shein's launching with maybe a couple hundred units per SKU. I mean, that's a rounding error for a $100 billion company. Traditional retail, they have no choice but to order thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of units of goods with each batch. And traditional fashion, especially, you're talking about 2 or 3 seasons a year that you can do this. Another thing that Shein does, and I think a lot of dropshippers will recognize, is that they base their initial launches on what's already available, on what the supplier is already making, on what the designs are already on, especially the Chinese market. And from the initial concept to the end of production, they take an average of 2 weeks. That's insane. That's insane in retail. And then, because their fulfillment center is literal days, sometimes hours away from their factories, and this actually means that from a couple hundred in the first test batch, as soon as the product is validated, they're able to scale up to 1,000, 10,000 orders per batch within weeks, within a month or two, before an original batch would have made it to the US in the first place. Also able to scale horizontally. They're able to see what their customers are buying, they're able to use market trends, and identify with a very high level of confidence what is going to sell and what they can confidently scale as fast as possible. And this is one of the biggest reasons why they're taking Zara and H&M's high. 6 months, 9 months of inventory, and if it doesn't sell out, you have a lot of waste. Whereas the Shein model, or drop shipping, we're shipping from China, it is more closer to this idea of made to order. Production is more precise, smaller batches, way shorter lead times, and it's based on actual customer consumption and actual customer demand. And that allows this model to have extremely low inventory numbers compared to the traditional model, and it vastly reduces waste. A push versus pull strategy of inventory management. The traditional model, the push model, which traditional fashion brands, traditional e-commerce brands use, is you order stock before you understand the full demand. You base it on approximations based on your projections for the year. I've been in the supply chain for years and I've never seen a single inventory projection, a single customer sales projection that was correct. Never. It's never accurate. This idea was theoretically impractical, or actually impossible, in the traditional model where your fulfillment is so far away from your production. Of this model is being able to enter global markets all at once. Who here has ever tried to ship anything from the US to anywhere else but the US? Expensive, right? Too expensive. You're not going to be able to sell D2C goods, especially with free or cheap shipping, to the UK from the US, for example. It's just too expensive and it takes too long. It's highly inefficient. Now, Shein, by shipping directly from China, and many dropshippers have realized this, you can enter in many markets at once. Now, I wouldn't suggest you entering 150 countries, but at the very least, top 20, 30 countries where you're going to have a lot of sales, you can enter them all at once, and you're going to have 50%, 70% sometimes cheaper fulfillment costs shipping to those customers. And in some cases, in many of the top markets, you're looking at 7-day shipping as opposed to 3-week shipping from the US. They have extremely low inventory on average. That's a very big positive for them. But that's usually a very bad thing because it means that you're selling out all the time. But Shein customers, they're used to it. They're used to stuff selling out. They're used to seeing limited runs of goods. And that actually creates a sense of urgency. Every single time that there is a new product, and they're launching new products all the time, Shein customers want to go back, want to go check, want to see what's new, and want to make sure to buy what they want before it sells out. And this creates an incredibly high repurchase rate compared to traditional retail. Now, I'll be honest here, Shein's products kind of suck, but they're not pretending to be anything different. They sell $5 shirts or €4 shirts. Do you really expect a $5 shirt is going to be as good quality as a $50 shirt, as an $80 shirt? Well, you shouldn't. And they're quite honest about it. They're very honest about it. Shein ships from China. They're not shy from that. Does anyone think that they do otherwise? I mean, Shein ships from China. This is the exact screenshot of their shipping time expectations to Barcelona. They don't pretend they have 2-day shipping. They don't need to. Customers buy from them anyways. It's fast enough, it's cheap, and it can ship internationally. Let's start with Shein, how Shein evolved through the years. Even though Shein essentially started as kind of dropshipping on steroids, where they work with their thousands of suppliers and utilize a lot of customer data to find the top sellers and test rapidly, they double down and triple down on the winners. They start putting and bringing in more stock. They start working with the suppliers, partnering with the suppliers to build a more integrated supply chain so they can scale up rapidly and also start working on improvements to the product so that even from the original design, they build it to their own specifications and potentially fix any quality issues.